Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of V Next. I am your host, Mike Walker, and today we are going to be talking with Mary Lacity about her new book called Blockchain Fundamentals. And so we're going to go through her background and her process of going and writing this book. She's going to talk about the Arkansas Blockchain COE, where she is a professor and she's the director of the Blockchain COE. And so it's going to be really interesting to hear her story and all the great things that she's doing with her association and with the book. Now, like always, all the show notes and links will be provided to you on vnextpod.com. That's vnextpod.com. All right, guys, let's get into it. Mary, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Michael, thank you so much.
So, we've been wanting to do this for quite some time, and we finally have been able to do it, and we've got a great reason to do it, right? Yeah, we're going to be talking about your book.
Awesome. Yes. And thank you for your contribution to my book.
Uh, no problem, anytime. And we've known each other for a little while now, but the other listeners might not know you. So it'd be good maybe if you would give us an overview of who you are and what you're up to.
Yeah, who is Mary Lacity? Right? So, right now, I am Walton Professor of Information Systems, and I'm at the University of Arkansas. So, this is coming from my office. I'm hoping you'll see a few students walk by, Mike. Of course, this is during days of COVID-19, so much of our activities are online these days, but our campus is open. I'm also the director of the Blockchain Center of Excellence here.
Nice. Yeah, so what's it like during this, global pandemic? How has things changed? How is the interaction different? I'm just curious. It's always interesting to hear folks' point of view from, different places around the country and the world.
Okay, so our campus is open. Many of our classes are delivered in a hybrid mode. So we have some face-to-face and students take turns coming to class and then coming online. I'm teaching actually a completely virtual class on blockchain fundamentals to an honors section of undergraduates. So we're making do. We're making do.
And so, you'd mentioned that you're a professor and you're the director of the Blockchain COE. Um, you know, Fairly prestigious position. A thought leading position. How does one get to that point? I mean, what was your journey like?
Oh, how did I get here? So my journey probably began because my department chair, his name is Dr. Rajiv Sabharwal. He and I were colleagues at the University of Missouri in St. Louis, where I was on faculty for 26 years. And he came here, I'm going to say, I might get this wrong, about 7 or 8 years ago. And he's been trying to get me to come down for a long time. And this was the ideal position to bring me here as the director of the Blockchain Center of Excellence. I got really passionate about the topic in 2016. Then in 2017, I was a visiting scholar at MIT in the Sloan School of Management, and I was leading a project, How are enterprises preparing for a blockchain future? And so this position came up in 2018. I applied for it, and I'm delighted I took it.
Yeah, and being one of the board members, you make it a lot of fun. We're always, learning new stuff, which is great. And for those that aren't familiar with the blockchain COE, it'd be good to maybe get an overview because some people, whenever they think about a COE, they got a very specific thing in their mind, and sometimes they think of what they might see within their company. But this is a little bit different.
It is a little bit different. So our mission is really to help educate and to do research on blockchain-enabled solutions. So you're one of our executive advisory board member firms. We have 9 in total, starting with the founding members were Walmart, IBM, JB Hunt, ArcBest, and Tyson Foods. And we're all learning together, aren't we, Mike? Right? So
Oh yeah.
we're trying to look at this set of enabling technologies, but the common theme that we all have is we have business problems to solve at an ecosystem level. And this is just one part of it. So in many ways, I hate the title Blockchain Center of Excellence because it makes people think I think blockchains is in the foreground. Really, it's in the background. we're all coming together to solve pain points shared by ecosystem partners. And so that's our kind of our research mission, learning and studying early adopters. And in our workshops, as you well know, we bring in thought leaders, companies that are actually doing this to solve ecosystem solutions. And then on the education side, we help enable our undergraduate and our graduate curriculum. So here at the University of Arkansas, we've got 4 undergraduate classes that are focused on blockchain technologies and 3 at the graduate level. And this is about our 3rd year delivering that. So our mission of education and research is has really been it's been fantastic here. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, and I think you're bringing up some really good points because oftentimes, and folks get passionate about the things that they're working on, and you called out directly. You're like, look, yes, this is the blockchain COE, but sometimes that's not always a good thing, because blockchain is not supposed to be this thing that's front and center. Really, the problem that we're trying to solve is front and center, and it just so happens there's this great technology that can help us solve some very specific and particular problems.
That's right. That's absolutely right. One of the things you'll find this interesting, Mike. So last week I spoke at the oil and gas blockchain conference, and they were talking about using blockchain technologies to finally address an ecosystem challenge called joint interest billing. And 30 years ago, I worked at Exxon trying to solve joint interest billing. And in those days, the state-of-the-art technology was EDI. So we all started implementing EDI. And now we're still having the same conversations, but we've got a better technology solution to finally address some of these shared problems.
Yeah, it's always fun, taking one of these new emerging technologies that now you're going to revisit something you did in your distant past. Like for me, a very similar thing. I spent the early part of my career in financial services, and specifically in consumer banking. And so when I had a project kind of pop up, one of our clients said, hey, we need help with our loan origination process. And, we think we have a theory that blockchain is going to help us with that, with all the coordination of paperwork, guaranteeing authenticity, attestations and tracking documentation, etc. It's funny kind of looking back and you're like, wow, yes, this was really, really difficult. If I only had this technology,
Technology, yes.
it would have been great.
All right. No, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I think that's really cool that you were able to do that, and I think also that we're able to kind of relate to some of those concerns because a lot of the data standardization things don't go away, and blockchain doesn't solve that. We still need to fix that, and a lot of the reconciliation of what status codes mean and things along those lines. But a lot of the plumbing work and the coordination of the information, blockchain does a really great job at that.
It does. It does. So, and I know we'll get into the conversation as we go along here, but we can talk about the business value we are seeing, the challenges, and come up with some like where we are today and where we're going in the future.
Yeah, and before we dive too deep into this, I always kind of like to throw a curveball at you guys here
Okay,
that
I'll
come
try to
on.
catch it, Mike. I'll
All
try
right.
to catch it.
And also just so people know that you're not just showing jazz hands because you like to. Maybe tell us a little bit about why you might be waving your hands in the background every once in a while.
Oh, because I'm in a sustainable building, and if I stay completely still, the lights go out. So every once in a while, I will gesticulate so that the lights come back on.
Nice, you're doing your part for the environment. I love it.
I am.
So, in that light, maybe tell us a little bit of something that folks may not know about you. So whether it's professionally or personally, but something that's an interesting tidbit about Mary Lacity.
I am going to share something personal, Mike, and I've never shared this in a professional environment before, but because you asked, I thought, okay, let me come up with something good here.
Nice.
All right. People do not know this about me, but I almost did not go to college. So here I am. I ended up going to college for 9 years, and now I'm a university professor. But when I was in high school, I grew up in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and the casinos were relatively new. And they came to our high school and said, we will pay you $25,000 a year for 6 weeks, and we'll train you how to be a dealer. So I thought, this was going to be my future. And all I can say is thank goodness for both of my parents. They are educators. My father was a history teacher and head of the 14 public schools in Atlantic City as a superintendent. My mother was an English teacher. My older sister was an English teacher, and they were all having a fit with my plans. So they convinced me to go to college, and I thank them in all my books. If it wasn't for them, I would be a blackjack dealer today.
Right. Those short-term dollar signs, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
if you worked for
As an
one,
18-year-old, no.
right, and if you worked for one of those casinos, it probably went bankrupt, and you may not even be doing that.
Oh, yes.
But anywho, so yeah, that's phenomenal. And that's probably one of the best stories that I've heard on the podcast so far. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
You're
Um,
welcome.
so we're going to jump into your book, and so for the folks that can see in my kind of blurry bokeh effect background, they'll see your book is right behind me. Thank you for the signed copy and all the attributions. That was phenomenal. But I haven't, full disclosure, I haven't gone through it all because there's a lot of pages. But you know, you've done a really, really great job as far as level of comprehensiveness, and of the subject overall. And so, maybe to start off with, Mary, why did you write this book?
Okay, I'm very happy to answer that question. So we use this as our textbook in our courses. So one of the things I was looking for something that was, you said, comprehensive, but does not assume that there's any background knowledge. So what I wanted to do was take the reader on a learning journey. So you can come with no background in technology, and I'm going to take you on a journey. And if you want to stay for all 10 chapters, you can. If you want, if you don't want to stay for all 10 chapters, you don't have to. But first of all, I start off with something that got me excited in this space, which is this idea of the Internet of Value. And I got that idea from Don and Alex Tapscott with their Blockchain Revolution book, the TED Talk from Don Tapscott. I heard Ginny Rometty talking about the Internet of Value back in 2016. So first provide a vision of where we want to go. And then we talk about the global landscape. Who are the players working on this? Who are the startups, the traditional enterprises, the consortia, the standards making body? Then I go under the hood. If you want to learn about the technology and you want to understand smart contracts and digital ledgers and digital assets, there's a chapter that explains that. And then the middle of the book is actually enterprise adoptions that are live today. So actual use cases. And I think for business people, they really want to know, is this thing real or is it not? So we study early adopters here, companies that have moved things from sandboxes into production. So I have chapters on applications in financial services, supply chains, credentials, and energy. And then the last chapters are really thoughtful, kind of forward-looking. What are the managerial challenges that need to be overcome, and what are some practices emerging to do that? What are some of the technical solutions that are emerging for scalability and interoperability? And then the last chapter, and you've got a nice excerpt in there, Mike, is the future. Where's the future going? So it's a whole journey. And if you're a professional, you don't have to read every chapter, right? You might say, hey, I'm interested in supply chains, and you dive in there. So that's why I wrote the book. I wanted something comprehensive that takes the reader on a learning journey.
No, I love it, and there's several things to unpack about what you said. One of the first and maybe most obvious is I didn't hear you once say Bitcoin or cryptocurrency.
Well, chapter 1 does talk about Bitcoin. I don't think you can talk about this space without talking about the beauty of the first live application since 2009.
Yep.
So Bitcoin gave us the first example of a live blockchain application. And to me, it's still inspiring. I love Bitcoin. I don't tend to talk about it too much with business folks, because there's many other use cases that they're interested in that apply this technology. But yes, we do start off with an understanding of Bitcoin. I don't think you can be in this space without understanding that first.
No, and I totally agree. And one of the things that I think happens whenever blockchain is brought up is very quickly there's a mapping that says, well, blockchain equals Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. And there is, while it's very good at cryptocurrency, there are so many other applications. And, that's kind of what I really like about what you had communicated is you said, look, there's all these industries that it can touch and really provide a significant amount of value.
Right. And it's almost like if you go back to 1996, one of the things I start up my classes off with, Mike, is I go back to an interview with Bill Gates and David Letterman. And Bill Gates says to him, what's this thing called I'm sorry, David Letterman says to Bill Gates, what's this thing called the internet? And Bill Gates is trying to explain it to him. And it's a hilarious clip because Bill Gates is saying things like, well, you can like watch a baseball game. And David Letterman's like, well, have you heard of the TV? He goes, but yeah, but you can watch it later. He goes, well, have you heard of a recorder? So like the use cases were not there and not visible. And for many people, when they hear blockchain, it's kind of the same thing. When they ask me, what are you going to use this for? I'm like, it's limitless, right? It's a generic, general purpose technology that helps solve ecosystem challenges. If there's, think of it as anything that can help. It's like software that's shared with many people. And so it's going to be limitless in the use cases that we see.
No, I agree. And, oftentimes when I describe it to folks, now it does require some level of baseline, technology knowledge. But, whenever I have this conversation, say, look, there were technologies that were built for companies to store information and transmit data amongst either themselves or a private set of parties. And it was really optimized for that. However, in this new digital world where we've got devices that are always connected, they're always on, they're always processing, and they're always communicating, those technologies weren't built to solve those particular problems. They weren't there to solve, all the, as a result of these devices and connections, there's all this data now. And the current technologies were not optimized to be able to coordinate and consolidate and master that data across all these disparate sources. And so whenever I talk about blockchain, I talk about it in terms of, listen, this is a modern incarnation, a modern tool to help us with, this whole digital revolution that's surrounding us. Is that crazy talk? Does that make sense to you, Mary?
No, that does make sense. And one of the things, again, blockchain is kind of boring when you really think about what it does, right? It's essentially a digital ledger that's immutable. But when all the things you just talked about, data sharing, analytics, you have to have data that everybody agrees upon. And so one of the base things that a blockchain enables is that we all agree these are the events that occurred. And then on top of that, you can run your analytics, you can, your machine learning algorithms. But if you don't have good data that everybody agrees on, none of these other initiatives work. So
Yes.
I view it as kind of a backbone. I like to say a blockchain backbone.
Yeah, I like that. I like that term. I like the term platform. I also, and I'm going to go out on a limb because I kind of get futury a little bit, if that's a real word. Um, is I like to call blockchain a tapestry, and the reason why I use the word tapestry is because blockchain can be architected and built to solve very specific problems that are meaningful to that organization and those collaborative partners. Because at the end of the day, because you had mentioned this, you said the internet of value, it's all about deriving value. And value, much like truth, is in the eye of the beholder. Sometimes value is monetary. Sometimes it's risk avoidance. Sometimes it's reputational. Sometimes it could be ethical and the common good. So there's lots of different ways value can manifest itself. And so when I think about the qualities of blockchain, I think about it as this underlying connective tissue that is in a very kind of artful way constructed to be meaningful and add value for your specific business.
Okay,
Now,
no, I like that. I like the metaphor. I haven't heard tapestry. I've heard Lego blocks. I mean, there's a lot of different metaphors we use, but I like the word tapestry. That's good.
and plus, I like to use words that other people haven't used, so I can
Yes.
call it a Mikeism. But outside of that, so another aspect here, and we're touching upon this, is you had mentioned the Internet of Value. It would be good to have you talk a little bit about that and what the Internet of Value means to you.
Okay. Well, the I'm going to, and I think that's more in the future than present. So I think that would be chapter one, kind of the vision. So I think the Internet of Value, and this is really I'm going to credit Don and Alex Tapscott because I think they had the vision right. Is today we have an Internet of Information, and so we can all seamlessly, use these protocols that nobody even talks about anymore. We don't care. We just know that it works. We send information to each other, but we're really sending copies of information to each other, right? So you send me an email, it's a copy. Well, when you talk about exchanging value, you cannot send copies. Sorry, you have to relinquish the value, and once you send it, you can no longer touch it, own it, or claim it. And so this set of protocols that we have through blockchains enables that. In a trusted environment, we are able to change value. That could be monetary value, it could be a shipment, it could be a good, it could be a service. And that's going to be the seamless way that we'll be able to exchange value in the future, the way we use the internet today to exchange information. So that's how I explain it. What's your spin, Mike? I'm sure you got a Mikeism for this.
I probably do, and as you know, I have an opinion on most things. But I think 99 percent of what you said, I would just be parroting the same thing. I think you're absolutely right. I think Don and Alex deserves a lot of the credit for seeing the future potential of this when you had, at least how I've seen the market over the past few years, you've had one camp of folks that have been absolute naysayers. This is just a future tech that has no applicability outside of Bitcoin. I've seen another camp where it's kind of this more idealistic, utopian view that pragmatist in me goes, okay, maybe in 50 or 100 years, maybe, but right now, probably not, unless we just start dissolving governments and things along those lines, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And I think there was this very small minority of folks that were like, wow, I had this project in, this industry, that industry, solving this, essentially a reconciliation problem. A lot of the big issues that blockchain is solving, and it's boring. It's totally boring. Is all these manual bulk copy, does your data match my data? We got to verify it. We got to have a small army of people do it, etc. These processes are antiquated and cost us a lot of money. Yes, there is already existing value in the data that's exchanged, and sometimes it's copies. Well, the majority of the times it's copies. Sometimes they're going by reference and going at the data. But I think that the larger challenge here is about the trustworthiness of the data, and can I take it for at its word that yes, this is the real data. And the underlying, again, another boring topic, master data management. And people
Yeah.
oftentimes don't associate blockchain with MDM, but I think it's a phenomenal MDM tool. And when you look at these products out in the market, customer MDMs and product MDMs, entitlement MDMs, etc., multi-million dollar products that blockchain could very easily put on an endangered species list. But that's kind of how I think about it. I think 99% of what you said, add on a little sprinkle of Mike-ness there.
Okay. Very good.
so so you talked about the internet of value and the inspiration from 2016. You talked about another core reason was to provide some core courseware material for the student body as well, in those pursuits. Now, you had mentioned also that as you were walking through the journey, that you're covering it from a novice's perspective, and you're taking them on this journey, and you're covering all these different industries. That's a lot of work. What was that process like to be able to assemble knowledge from people and experiences, and trying to figure out what is real and what isn't real? What was that like?
Okay. So, well, Mike, this is what I love to do. This is the 30th book I've written. So I've been, I know how to write a book.
Wait a second, you said 30th?
Yeah, it's my 30th book.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know what I think until I write. So when I really want to learn something, that's my ambition, is to want to write a book for it. But I do want to get one soundbite in, Mike, because I think this is important. I waived all my royalty rights, so I make $0 on this book, and I did that because I wanted the price point low so that students could afford it. So it's only $27.95. And I don't want to be making money off of students out there. So that I just
Right.
wanted to get that in. So where did this come from? I don't just sit down and write it blank. It's very iterative. So part of our work at the Blockchain Center of Excellence is to study early adopters. So you kind of write one case study at a time. And we do that by interviewing the companies that participate. If there's a technology partner, we interview them. And so we start gathering these cases up. And then I start looking for lessons and extracting lessons from across all of these different use cases. So my favorite chapter is actually chapter 9. That's the managerial lessons. And I learned from the people who went first. So you study the early adopters, the pioneers, and I'm just so grateful with how open these enterprises have been, right? Most of the time you think that they want to keep their secrets, but this is really like, think about Dave Christie, right, from Federal Express.
Yeah.
They've been incredibly open about the challenges that they're facing, the business value challenges. How do you put a business case together? How do you do shared governance? We're all learning together. This is where I am in my learning journey, as reflected in the summer of 2020. But that book will change dramatically over the next couple of years, and so I'll be ready to write another one.
No, I like that, and kudos to you as well. Because books aren't hard. Books aren't hard. Books are hard, and it takes a lot out of you to be able to do one, and to kind of go for the common good and saying, look, I want to try to get that price point as low as possible so that a student can actually purchase this thing. I think that's just phenomenal.
Well, I'm so proud too, because this is the second book in what's known as the Epic book publishing, and this was started by my dean.
Hmm.
So my dean is a real innovator, and I'm going to hold up his book. He's written a book on blockchains.
Oh,
Isn't
nice.
that awesome? So my own dean has written a book on blockchains and supply chains with one of my other co-authors, Professor Remco van Hoek, and our supply chain department chair. So I'm in an environment that is very welcoming to both blockchains and also books. And the Epic book, our dean, the reason why he started this publishing company is he wanted to have our best work come to print quicker. So you probably know most traditional publishing, and I've published with a lot, whether it's Springer or Wiley or Prentice Hall. It's a very, very long process. I turned this book in at the end of July, and it was in my hands at the end of August.
Wow.
So can't get any quicker. So I live in an environment of innovators. So that's been exciting. And now I completely forgot your question, Mike.
No, you answered it, and there's two
Okay.
two key points I think that you made that was really interesting, and you didn't call these out specifically, so I'm going to call them out. One, not only does the traditional book publishing process it's incredibly slow, but also as far as academia is concerned, um, it isn't the most progressive either. And for you and the rest of the faculty and the dean, etc., to really embrace this level of agile and nimbleness is, again, another testament to all the great innovation you guys are doing.
It is, and we partner with the University of Arkansas Press, so that's one of the outlets where you can buy the book, and they've been phenomenal. They've got our book everywhere. I mean, so it'll be picked up by it's at all the Amazons. I just saw it on Amazon Japan today. We've already been asked to translate it into Persian of all languages,
Okay.
and it's just happened so quickly. So yeah, I'm very happy to have an academic book at the University of Arkansas Press under Epic Book Publishing.
Now I have to ask because you brought up people sharing their horror stories. Are there any stories that you weren't able to share in the book that you could share with us?
No. uh, if one of the things that we do as academics is we're not journalists, right? So it's not like you do an interview and you write whatever you want as a journalist, right? So anything we write with our enterprise partners has to go through their approval process. But again, I was always surprised about how much was able to be left in with what I wrote. So as I said, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've written 30 books. My first set of books were on outsourcing, and the clients would tell me these horror stories, and I would write up this beautiful case study, and so much of it I wasn't allowed to say. But in the blockchain space, it's been, they've been really forthright with I think very well know what the challenges are. It's on things like data policies, and it's on how do we scale this thing up when, 5 of us in a room designed it. I mean, they're really forthcoming with the challenges that they face.
Yeah, dealing with lawyers, uh, another good one. Now, and yeah, I was didn't want necessarily for you to call anybody out necessarily, but I guess another way of asking the question, Mary, would be, um, were there things outside of the level of candidness? Were there other things that caught you off guard or surprised you as you started going through these interviews?
I think the one thing, and I know this, that you will probably relate to this. So you're working with ecosystem partners on a solution. You've got representatives from these different enterprises. They're so excited about what they've designed. And then they go back to their own organizations. And if you don't have the right person that has the decision-making rights, that's high enough in the organization, they couldn't sell it internally. So these projects can easily stall. So one of the things I talk about in Chapter 9 is this idea of who has to be that representative, to have the authority and the resources to make decisions on the behalf of their organization, so that they don't run into this problem when they go back, because you won't make progress with your ecosystem partners unless you have the right people. And I also have this idea of a participant pledge. So when you're coming to do a shared solution, you're not going to be the winner on every vote. Right? So
Right.
you're going to have to accept that you're committed to the higher mission of this initiative. You're not going to get your way on everything. And that you have to appreciate and have empathy for your ecosystem partners. So a problem for somebody is a problem for everybody, and trying to solve it together. The other lesson is you're going to fight like mad in these things, right? But you present a united front when you walk away. So no matter what we've decided in here, no matter who's the person you don't want to have lunch with tomorrow, once you've come to your decision, it's not going to be a unanimous decision, but hopefully it'll be one that was made with a majority, or perhaps a super majority, that you buy into that solution when you go back to your organizations and when you're talking to the public, because it takes a tremendous amount of commitment to actually make an ecosystem solution come to life. And you know all this, Mike.
No, I agree. I think it's right, and I think that people often don't understand that, uh, particularly with this technology, more than most technologies, uh, the majority of the decisions are business decisions. They're not technology decisions, because a lot of the technology decisions are actually made for you. I mean, the protocol is fairly straightforward. There aren't a whole lot of core technical decisions that need to be made. It's really, what's the level of trust, what's the participatory model, how are we going to monetize this, how are we going to protect data, how are we going to be compliant with governments and regulations, and all these other things. What are we doing to our business model? Are we going to completely kill an existing business model that we've had for decades? And how much risk do we want to incur to go down this new path? And all of those questions are business questions. And
Oh,
so,
yes.
80 to 90% of the questions that you're going to be asking yourselves in the lifetime of this, digital ecosystem that's enabled by blockchain are going to be business decisions. And that is tough for a lot of the traditional technologists, because they're not used to that amount of business acumen being put into these technology projects. And two, there is a level of uncomfortableness as well with, what I always recommend to my clients is, don't wait to get these folks involved. Get the people that write the checks, or go to jail when bad things happen. get to know people, and bring them into the room immediately, because what's going to happen is, and you said it earlier, just like with your book and how you put your book together, you got to take them on the journey with you and make it feel like we're all in this together. Just like when you start to roll in other companies into this, because it's going to be about the greater ecosystem, not just one company, but start to get those folks involved super super early to be educated on why and what are the key trade-offs that are going to need to be made, because at the end of the day, your business to business relationships, or B2B relationships, your B2E B2C relationships, the dynamics change. And what people don't realize is, yeah, there is some technology goodness there, but a lot of times those relationships already exist, and there's legal agreements that define what can and can't be done and how it's done and service levels and all of this stuff that you have to unwind to be able to put something new in place. And so it just gets complicated really quick, and not having those people in the room early on is a huge mistake. So I'm super glad that you had made an explicit point to highlight that in your book.
Absolutely. So, think about how hard innovation is within the boundaries of the firm. Now you're talking about innovation across firm boundaries. So you have to have higher level people involved to authorize a change like of this magnitude.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can't just bring a bunch of technologists from, because oftentimes it's going to be your competitors that are going to be in the room. This isn't, yeah, there could be some cases where there's some suppliers or what have you, but we're talking about ecosystems where it's a collaborative motion. And so you can't just be bringing, architects and project managers and developers from other companies. Say, hey guys, let's go all get together, drink coffees, eat muffins, and talk about how we're going to share all of our data.
Right.
There are some very senior people that would have a very big problem with that.
Right. And we're not, and actually, one of the interesting things is we're not seeing a lot of additional data sharing. It's just a different platform for it. So you
Hmm.
work with your supply chain partners, but instead of having to have custom interfaces with every single supply chain partner, it's messy every time you try to onboard one. It's really like having a set data policy, a set standard. Your data. People always say, "Are you giving your data away?" I said, "It's up to you. The data owners still control access to the data." Even the technology partners that might be hosting the nodes cannot interpret the data that is stored in those ledgers unless the data owners give them permission to view it. So
Yep.
it's a real secure data model. You're not giving away anything additional, but you don't have to have that one, the point to point to point to point. You can have a data model, like you talk about master data, that everybody agrees on.
Yep.
The other comment I think that's worth making is everybody calls, like the trust protocol. What does that mean? For me, I view trust a little differently. I don't think that we all think that our trading partners are malevolent, or we wouldn't do business with them. We trust the benevolence of our trading partners. But what really lack of trust means is I'm not going to let anyone update my data or verify a process. I want to make sure that the verification is done right. And that's really what, for me, what blockchain technologies enables so beautifully is the data verification, and that processes and events have occurred as we have agreed to them.
Yeah. No, I think you're making a phenomenal point again, Mary, and that point is, uh, listen, if we're a big company, let's say we are just random company, B of A. If I'm Bank of America and I'm getting data from Wells Fargo, or Fifth Third or whoever, you know, trust isn't an issue because we've got a legal agreement between our two companies that you're not going to do any harm, and if you do, we're going to come and sue you. And so I agree. I think the trust protocol thing, that part I do see as a bit of kind of fluffiness and an area where it's not really the focal point. The focal point is we've got all these widely inefficient processes that are rampant. We've got duplication of data because we're copying the data and we're not getting it from its source. We don't have true brokering systems. It is difficult for us to guarantee the security around the protocol. and to be able to enforce things like providence, but also things like sovereignty as well, to provide a level of governance around cross organizational barriers, because many of the data technologies weren't built for multi-company, they were built for single companies. And so databases were never built for multiple companies together. I mean, we've made it that way with web services and service oriented architecture, but they weren't built that way. And you can go down to the lowest common denominator, which is the licensing model. It's to the company. The company owns the license, not a group of companies. And so I think you're making a phenomenal point here. I just wanted to expand upon that because I think that's a key subtlety that oftentimes people don't really get. Now, the other thing I'll throw out here, and it'd be interesting to see if you agree with this, but I think once the public sector, the compliance community, the auditor community, once they really start to understand the power of this technology, oh, it's game over. I think this is an auditor, a compliance person, a governmental agency. I mean, this technology is core of what they're talking about, what they want companies to do. And it just seems to me that once the secret's out of the bag, with this community, they're just going to be all over it.
Yeah, and I like your point. I just want to ask you a question back, because that's the same community that thinks this is all hype, right? So that, and again, I'm on my own journey. How do you educate people about the realities without overselling,
That's
right? And
yeah.
go
You're right.
ahead.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so I do some work with the Digital Chamber of Commerce that interacts with their, I think, technically a lobbying organization to the federal government, and they work on helping to educate the public sector on these things. And I think the challenge is that oftentimes, um, how do I describe this in a politically correct way? I'll tell you what, let's forget the politically correct way. Everyone has a microphone. Some people's microphones are bigger than others. If you are a senator at the federal level, you will get a megaphone. If you are in the Department of Agriculture, the Department of, whatever, some buried agency somewhere, which there's hundreds if not thousands of these things. The federal government isn't just one thing, it's many agencies doing many different things. The benefit isn't to the congressmen and the senators, and yes, cryptocurrency does have value, as far as a digital dollar or an independent currency itself, but I think that's less of the benefit compared to how we can help materially solve some of the operational aspects of the whatever government, whether it's us or whoever's government. And I think those people, and because I've talked to these people, I mean, they're fans of the technology. It's just they've got a small little lavalier microphone and they're trying to talk loud into it. Can you testing 1 2 3? Can you hear me? Oh no, because Senator Fubar over there is screaming that this is the end of the world here, and that cryptocurrency is only used by drug dealers and the black market and the dark web, etc. And so I think that the challenge really is, in a lot of ways, is the voice of some of these other agencies isn't heard loud enough. And
Yes.
I think
Mm.
part of that is, um, there will need to be some momentum and a series of wins to show, yes, there is proof. We see land titles as an example, put on a blockchain. People are like, okay, so what? Okay, great. You get your land titles there. But when I think, in my mind, the difference and the impact will occur whenever there is a big moment, an event where, let's say, a natural disaster, a hurricane goes through, and it was because of this blockchain technology that we were able to identify with e-citizen ID survivors of a hurricane where everything was decimated, and they were able to have their records all there. Or from a healthcare perspective, if we're talking about reinventing our healthcare system, why the heck wouldn't we use blockchain to be able to have HIPAA compliant data that's going across to all these different medical facilities? And then me as the consumer, I can choose who has my data. And with one click, I can say, nope, take that back. And with blockchain, I've got that level of visibility. I could have a single pane of glass where I could see that. But I think it's going to be things like that outside of what we talk about in the Center of Excellence a lot, which is the POC fatigue, the proof of concept fatigue. There's lots of proof of concepts that show, yes, look, it works, it's great, but we gotta get it out there. We gotta get it into the wild. I don't know. Does that rambling make any sense to you, Mary?
Yes, there's a couple points I want to pull out when you said the size of the microphone. So I think we have proved in sandboxes over and over again, for example, in healthcare, the value proposition of people having all of their healthcare data secured by a blockchain that can give access rights. But there's very powerful players out there that have absolutely every interest against killing anything like this. All right. So think of, payers. How do they make their money? A lot of it's on the float, right? The
Right.
cash float.
Yep.
So they're are they gonna want to healthcare laws? I mean, there's a lot that has to change. You almost need a groundswell. My ultimate litmus test is when I look at this technology, I was hoping by this election we would have had at least some states or some jurisdictions that would have our votes secured on a blockchain. When we can't even agree to let the U.S. mail carry our ballots, I don't know if it's even going to happen by 2024. But you're right. We know solutions that can work. We really have to have a groundswell of activity to come together to try to push through, because we got people. There's going to be winners and losers, and if the winners are very powerful, they can pay lobbyists. It's hard to do fundamental changes. That's one of the brilliant things about Bitcoin,
Yep.
right? Because Bitcoin, that they bypassed everything. No governments, nobody can control it or shut it down. No regulators, right? I mean, it's just it was just a completely revolutionary idea that it's still here today. 11 years, it hasn't been hacked. It's amazing. So I have days where I'm very optimistic, days where I'm a little bit more pessimistic. But it's a journey. That's all I always go back to. It's a journey.
I think you're right. And another aspect here is I do believe that not only do we need kind of that groundswell, and we need for a lack of a better term, the killer app for blockchain. Um, we also, I think, there could be an event or a leader that says, "I'm just going to make you do it." And so, if we did have, a certain number of authorities, a president or whatever that said, "We're going digital, guys, and my CTO is going to make sure it's the most secure thing, and we're going to use blockchain." Done. Right. And so sometimes we also forget that it could be incredibly easy as well. Does that now that incredible easy path? It doesn't happen very often, but it most certainly can happen. I think with elections and with how much focus that we're having on this, because I've challenged, because I've had access to congressmen, senators, and such. I've put them on the spot. I don't care. And said, look, you're actually putting forth blockchain legislation. Let me take this one step further. How about our voting? What do you think about that? And if you want to see a level of backpedaling, and because what that's doing is it's truly forcing transparency in the process. And unfortunately, politicians are politicians, and that's just what it is. But incentive drives behavior. And so if there was significant incentive for them to shift, and it was politically correct enough to do it, so like if this election that comes up, if it's an absolute shit show, which I'm totally anticipating it will be, and I'm not getting into a political conversation whatsoever, but I'm just on face value, I think it's going to be an absolute shit show. And hopefully that is enough for people to say, guys, we got to fix this system. I mean, the thing that we invented 250 years ago, we really need to reinvestigate this, because if I can go on my phone and wire $100,000 to someone in Africa right now as we're doing this podcast, why can't I cast my vote on the same device? Right? That's just me. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's crazy talk.
My favorite of all your episodes, my actually favorite one that you did was with Steve Lupian, because I loved your the first part you talked about beef chain, and then the second part, it seemed like you pivoted to talk about regulations and all the pro Wyoming regulations. But really, I learned that in that small state, a lot of their legislatures are also ranchers.
Right.
Right. So they got something done. It's a smaller state, right? So maybe they're a little bit more agile. But boy, I'm looking at them as a model of what the rest of the country could do.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And thank you for your podcast. I thought that was excellent.
Yeah. Sometimes we go in unexpected places, and it's just all sorts of goodness. Um,
Yeah.
So, getting back to your book for a moment, I do want to ask, because not everyone's an author, and we established that it is tough. It does take a lot of work. It's fairly grueling. I guess for you, as you're writing these books, and you've written 30 of them, so I can't imagine talking to anybody else that would know more about this. But for you, what would be your kryptonite when it comes to writing books? Are there, you know, anything that says, as far as having a, what's the word for it? Just having a kind of a gap where you're just like, today, I don't want to write, or whatever. Is there any particular thing that affects you in an adverse way?
Starting is difficult. But I've learned a lot of tricks from other writers. But really, I have a very rigid schedule. So I get up first thing in the morning and I start to write. I mean, I make a cup of coffee and I start to write. I don't shower. I do nothing. I start writing, and I can only write about 5 or 6 hours a day. But if I do, I get into a rhythm and I do it every day. So I wrote that book. I didn't take a single day off. It didn't matter whether it was Saturday or Sunday, but I was pretty much done by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I just do that. And the other trick for anyone who wants to write is I like to stop when I'm still in the flow, because then it's easy to start again in the morning. Right. So that it's a great thing to know how you're going to begin again in the next day. There are days that I write myself into a corner and I'll go for a walk and I just start again. Okay, that didn't work, because again, for me, why I love to write books is it helps me understand how I think about something. So I think this framework looks good, but you don't know until you try to populate that framework with words and examples. So I never write from an outline, and so I've never done a book proposal. Most faculty and authors will do a book proposal. I have no idea how this book is going to turn out. I start it from the middle and work my way out. So that's just my process.
No, I like it. I think that's really interesting, and I think that oftentimes people get hung up. And I know that I've had this challenge earlier in my career, where it was just like, where do I begin? I'm so overwhelmed. This is such a big area. But what I've learned, and I think what you're communicating, is just start writing, see where it goes. And what I find is a lot of that apprehension, anxiety, etc., of, oh my gosh, this is such a big thing, starts to go away, because you're actually starting to work through the problem, and you're actually, you've got your start, and you may be writing chapter 9 out of 20. That's okay. You now have kind of a center of gravity that you can kind of go out from and start to populate those other chapters.
Right, and I like to start with actual examples, right? So that's what we do as faculty, is we study early adopters, and it's encapsulated. Just write this case, then write this case, then this. Now, how do you organize them? Well, let's organize them by industry. Now, step back. What are some common themes across it? What were some of the common pain points? What are some practices that worked well? Then you've got your lessons learned chapter and your practices chapter, and then elevate it up here. Well, where are we going? What's the future of this going to be? So for me, I don't find it painful. I find it utterly enjoyable. I love to write. I absolutely love to write.
I 100% agree with you, and at least from my corner of the world, I've had folks that I've worked with, say, so Mike, why are you publishing this? Why are you doing a podcast? And I tell people, it's like, look, I'm not making any money off this. I don't even care about that stuff. What I'm doing here is it is a framework for me to continuously learn. And so I'm talking to super interesting people doing awesome stuff. I'm learning something every time I do this because, I don't, just like most podcasters, I don't just hop on this thing and just start flapping my gums or saying, hey, here's a stock set of questions for you. But I've got to go and do my research. I got to know who the person is. I got to figure out, about that subject and have some sort of understanding. And so that is a way, just like what you described with a book, that is my way of always staying on top of things, is by forcing, hey, yes, I'm going to go have that conversation, and I'm not going to be embarrassed by not being prepared, because one, that's embarrassing, but two, it's wildly unprofessional. And so I value my reputation much higher than that. And so uh, if anything, I'll go out on a limb here, Mary. I'd say I think what you're talking about is a great framework for education in general.
But I think I agree with you. One of the things I always tell my students, we're here to train you to be lifelong learners, right? When I started, when I was, back when I went to college, we were on mainframe computers, right? So I like this field because there's always an opportunity to learn something. And I don't present myself as an expert. I present myself as I'm on my own learning journey, right? And so
Right.
I know more than some people, but I know less than others. So I too enjoy interviewing people because I learn from them.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is even if you are an expert in a particular area, you've got a very specific lens. You got a very specific perspective and set of experiences. And so, I find, even when I'm in conversations, go, "Oh, well, Mike, you're the expert of foo," and I say, "Well, I know some stuff, and I've had some really great opportunities and some experiences. However, those are a finite set of experiences and initiatives, projects, client interactions, etc. There are other people that equally have the same types of experiences, but from a wildly different angle, from a different industry, that are going to provide new and interesting perspectives on that particular topic. And so I think, like you said, preparing students to be lifelong learners, but also knowing you'll never truly master a topic, a subject, because the world is full of all these infinite possibilities and permutations, and context is everything. And so understanding that the diversity of ideas is so important, even if you are an established thought leader in a particular area. I don't know. That's just my crazy way of thinking about the issue, at least.
Do you know one of the things why I absolutely get so inspired about being a university professor, and I tell my undergraduate students this all the time, this is the only time in their life where their learning is broad,
Mm,
right? Wouldn't you love to go back to school and take philosophy and art classes and economics classes, right? Because when you get to be a professional, you earn your living by being an expert in a very narrow domain. And so in many ways, I always say I applaud them when they make connections between their different classes and they bring different ideas together. I'm like, that bricolage is just such a sweet spot when you're young and a university student. It's awesome.
yeah, I just kind of, you triggered a few things in my head as you said that, and I was just thinking, if my professors thought I was a pain in the rear before, now knowing what I know now and really being deeply engaged and challenging and debating, and well, let's take that concept, let's blow this thing out, let's talk about this thing, as a skill that we learn as we grow older and more comfortable in our own skin and all that. Yeah, they probably wouldn't like that, but I think that's so valid, and I think that's a really cool way of thinking about it. Okay,
I
so
hope your professors wouldn't treat you that way. How I present myself is I say I'm your learning coach. So I'm here, to help you explore your passions. And so what are you interested in? And they come up with phenomenal use cases and business ideas. And some of them are horrible. And I was like, how are you going to scale that? But but I'm your
Right.
coach and I hope I'm always approachable and I love to be challenged. And I was like, you know what? That's an excellent question. I've never thought of it that way. Or I don't know the answer to that. That's fine. I'm your coach. I'm on your side. And, let's just see what you're interested in and how I can help enable you to learn what you want to do. It's awesome. I love being a professor.
No, I think, yeah, I think you're right, and I think times have definitely changed. I've had the good fortune of talking to actually several professors. Some of the episodes have published that you can see. One with the University of Cincinnati chief innovation officer. That was a phenomenal conversation. We talked about some of this stuff as well, and had a really good conversation with another professor as well in a business school. And I think with that particular interview, we actually addressed this issue head on, and he had brought up, and he's like, this isn't like how education used to be. It's slowly changing, and some universities are better than others at it. But there is a sea change happening to where the old model of being tenured and maybe having one class a week, two classes a week, and being set, and your biggest concern is writing a dissertation for some trade publication. That model is dying. And you probably know all about that stuff, and that's not what you do, which is why I love our conversations. But just reflecting back into, I guess, the 20-year ago, 30-year ago model, however long it's been, I stopped counting after 10. My C++ professor, when I'm going through with him and saying, okay, well, you're telling me to do this in 20 lines of code, but I can do it in one. And I'm also working right now, and my employer says they want less code, not more code. So I'm going to challenge you on this, and essentially having the statement come back, no, you're wrong.
Oh, that's a terrible story.
But that was a long time ago.
Okay.
That's not the story today. Um,
Okay.
so shifting back to your book, what I think, to kind of round us out and kind of close us out here, Mary, you know, I guess for people that are either going to read your book or thinking about reading your book, what do you think are the top 3, 4, 5 takeaways that you think people are really going to get from your book?
Okay. I think what they'll get from my book is that this is not hype. There are innovators and early adopters that already have solutions that are in production. So solving real business problems. So I think that's the main thing. Where hype might come in is the pace of change. So we as technologists all tend to overestimate how quickly technology will disrupt things. We're not really seeing disruption with these first generation solutions. It's more about kind of rising tides raise all ships. So we're not seeing, at least for traditional companies, a lot of disruption yet. But I think in the long term, we've probably underestimated how this is going to transform not only businesses, but societies.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably a good takeaway.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, and when we talked earlier about the kind of different personas of factions when it that come to the blockchain world, where some of the more optimistic folks say it's going to revolutionize, change the world, next year. I think blockchain is interesting because it's incredibly effective at what it's good at, but it's incredibly boring. Um, Cost optimization, reconciliation, master data management, provenance, digital attestations, all these data centric things, they're not very sexy. And, and what we're going to see is we're going to see, at least in my experience and kind of what I've observed in the marketplace, is we're going to see kind of in that first wave, as you described, lots of mini ecosystems boot up, because these mini ecosystems, people are dipping their toes in. They don't want to take a whole lot of risk. However, they go, this is a great technology and it's going to save me a ton of money. And this technology it's going to save them a bunch of money that perhaps they in the past didn't quantify because it was buried in human capital cost. where they had 50 people, working full time for 6 months cleaning up data. Well, traditionally, a lot of companies don't count that, and they also don't count opportunity costs. And now, if I don't have these people for 6 months doing this work, now what new things could I have those people do that will add new value, will create a new business line or model or product or service or what have you? And I think once we start getting those kind of spots start to light up, then people are going to go, oh, but what if we connected this ecosystem to this ecosystem? What if we just, hell, let's get crazy. Let's consolidate this big swath of ecosystem, make it one. How about that? And then I think that the train will be out of the station. And so I look at this very similar to how you look at it, which is I think this is going to be a slow burn, and we're going to see incremental value. And I do truly believe there will be a tipping point where people will go, okay, guys, I get it now. I get it. We should probably just do this. I think we'll get to that point. It won't be, again, we're bad at crystal ball reading. We're horrible at it in this industry. But it's I think within 5+ years, I think we'll be well on that path. I have every leading indicator tells me that, but outside of some catastrophic thing, I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
It does. It does. And I also like some of the points you made. A lot of things have to co-evolve. So as
Right.
blockchain technologies are evolving, we need digital first, right? So if you're paper-based, none of this works. So we need that to evolve. IoT is evolving. We're getting 5G. I studied automation. That was my book before this one. And the big problem was data,
Right.
right? Machine learning algorithms. Well, you need good data with, that has an example and a label. Organizations that crushed a lot of initiatives. Yeah, the technology worked, but we didn't have good data.
Right.
So I think one of the things blockchain is going to help us with is having a foundation of data that we can rely upon to deploy the next set of value-added technologies to get real business value here. It's going to be a great time. I'll be in this space for a while, and I hope you stay in it with me, Mike.
I'm right here with you, Mary. We're gonna fight the good fight.
Okay.
Now, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
Oh, that's easy. We're at blockchain.uark.edu. I'm also the only Mary Lacity on the planet, so if you Google me, it's really easy to find my contact information, my LinkedIn page, etc.
You're lucky there. There's lots of Mike Walkers.
There are a lot of Mike Walkers.
Just at Microsoft, there's a lot of Mike Walkers. I was actually surprised. There's 30 or 40 Mike Walkers at the company, and every once in a while, maybe every few weeks, I'll get an email from another Mike Walker saying, "I think this was meant for you."
For you, yes.
Well, listen, Mary. Again, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about all your great work, and look forward to having you back on again sometime soon.
Well, I look forward to having you speak next week at our Blockchain for Business conference. So thank
Oh
you.
yeah, that's right. So let's plug that. So tell folks about the conference.
Well, our conference theme is, not surprisingly, the Internet of Value. We have 500 registrations as of today, which I'm told is phenomenal because normally you get a lot of registrations the week of. We have keynote speakers in Paul Brody from EY. We have Nick Szabo, who created the whole concept of smart contracts.
Woohoo.
We have lots of board members presenting from Walmart and Microsoft and IBM and McKesson. We've got some startups presenting. We've got about 80 students will be attending and engaging with thought leaders. And Alex Tapscott, he's going to be our first keynote. I can't even get
Nice.
through. It's an all Blockstar lineup. Let's just leave it at that. And you're one of them, Mike.
Love it, love it. I can't believe we didn't bring it up sooner, but we got it in.
We did.
All right, Mary. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. All right.
Bye bye.